Chapter 939 of One Piece is out, and not only did we get filled in on the events in Wano 20 years ago, but we also got another great lecture on armament haki in this chapter. We start off at the cemetery in Ringo, where we got sent into the break with Kumurasaki revealing herself to Zoro as Momo's sister Hiyori. Now, we finally get to see Zoro's reaction to this reveal. While for the professional and weekly One Piece reader, this reveal might not have come as a great shock, Zoro definitely didn't have the same information that we had, and therefore is genuinely and understandably surprised by this news. As was already hinted at in previous chapters, the true Hiyori seems to be very different from her character of Kumurasaki. Now, I'm aware that there are still rumors out there that this all might be an act to deceive Zoro, and I agree that this sudden and drastic change of personality can feel as over the top. But while I do not doubt that there is definitely more to the story here, I genuinely do think that this is in fact Hiyori, also based on the knowledge that she shares with Zoro in this chapter. From now on, I will therefore continue from that perspective. Compared to her counterpart Kumurasaki, Hiyori seems to be a very caring, emotional, and even a little bit childish when she is herself, which in my opinion is totally to be expected when you consider what she went through for the past 20 years. We learned that Hiyori was 6 years old when Momo and the samurai were sent into the future, which makes her 26 today. She tells Zoro of that fateful night when Oden Castle was being attacked by Kaido and the Shogun, and how she had to watch her brother and the 3 samurai vanish into an uncertain future. I expect that this must be something really hard for a 6-year-old to understand and to accept. And if that was not enough though, she also lost her father Oden and her mother Toki. And while there are some speculations also to whether one of them is still alive or not, this doesn't change the fact that Hiyori actually and genuinely thought that her parents died that day. When asked by Zoro why she didn't go with her brother, she explains to us that she was left behind to ensure that the Kozuki's bloodline would survive, even if Toki's plan would fail. It then fell to Kawamatsu to rescue the princess from the burning castle through the water channel and to later take care of her and raise her in her parents' stead. Now, as a consequence of these traumatic events, especially for a young child, Hiyori lost her will to live after losing all her family in one night. Kawamatsu had to slowly warm her up again and take care of her, all while being surrounded by enemies with hardly any food to eat. We also learn more about Kawamatsu himself from Hiyori, even though we are still not shown his face in this chapter. Yet the princess reveals that the samurai is indeed a kappa, as could be speculated from Kawamatsu's laugh that literally was kappa. This would explain why the retainer was able to flee effortlessly through the sewers and to survive on nothing but rotten fish for over the past 13 years. If you ask yourself why that is, let's have a small excursion into Japanese mythology. Kappas, you see, are water demons from Japanese lore. They are typically depicted as green, human-like beings with webbed hands and feet and a turtle-like carapace on their backs. In a bowl on its head, it retains water, and if this bowl is damaged or its liquid is spilled, the kappa is severely weakened. This might, for example, explain why we see Kawamatsu depicted with his large, round straw hat, even in a cell. Kappas are also known for their love to engage in sumo wrestling, which we will also see later in this chapter. Interestingly enough, one name of a kappa is Kawazo, which means otter, and suggests a resemblance to this animal. This might hint that Kawamatsu is in fact either looking like an otter, or that he really is an otter mistaken for a demon. We will see. Now, to end the short excursion, here you can have a weird fun fact. Kappas are often accused of assaulting humans in water and removing a mythical organ from the victim's anus. What the hell, Kawamatsu? But back to the chapter now. Zoro apparently fills in Hiyori about how they ended up in Wano, since he mentions Nekomamushi and Inuarashi. The news that the two are in Wano as well makes her cry out in happiness, since she thought both were dead as well. Since she last met the two 20 years ago, she refers to them as the doggy and the kitty, which, let's face it, is pretty damn cute. Next, Zoro finally does us the favor of listing the 9 red scabbards that were still not confirmed to this point. The 7 members we have seen so far are Kinemon, Kanjuro, Raizo, Kiku, the 2 Minks Inuarashi and Nekomamushi, as well as Ashura Doji, or Shutemaru as he's called now. The 8th member is Kawamatsu, whose face we still haven't seen but who we got to know a little better in this chapter nonetheless. The last and only unknown character in this list is Denjiro, who could be someone we already met somewhere or someone completely new. Now, when Hiyori brings up the secret message, Zoro mentions the information leak they had despite their growth in numbers. And he even becomes a little bit poetic then by comparing their situation with a boat that is filling with more and more boatmen, but that won't move the way they want to. We are not really used to this kind of philosophical talk from Zoro, but maybe it's just Wano's culture slowly seeking in on him. Zoro himself though also decides that this was enough poetry for the day and goes right back to sleep with Toko by his side. Hyourse meanwhile thinks about the best timing to meet her long-lost brother. Now, before we leave the graveyard in Ringo though, I want to mention two things. Firstly, I wonder if Hyourse really took a gamble when confining into Zoro, or if she actually knew more. And secondly, I wonder what the real deal is with Toko, since she knew a lot about Kumarazaki's true identity all along. She's actually starting to become a real competition for Kyoshiro on my list of mysterious characters in Wano. We now turn our attention towards the capital, where we see all the supporters of the Kozuki rebellion that were caught by Orochi's and Kaido's men. They are rounded up in a building, but it's not really an ordinary prison, but a single huge cell that is meant for public display and shaming. We also see lost crew among them that look pretty badly beaten. One of them is Beppo, who in my mind now can be really cleared of any suspicion to be the traitor, and who explicitly hopes that no one thinks that they leaked the information in the first place. I think this whole setup of all Kozuki followers in one room in the middle of a square in the capital pretty much cries for a mass breakout sometime soon. But now let's finally return to Udon, where we get the second major part of this chapter. We get a glimpse at Kawamatsu, who really wants to participate in the sumo match going on in front of his cell, and that kinda confirms the characteristics of a Kappa as we remember. In the ring, we see that Luffy and Hyogoro have made it past the foot soldiers, and they're now fighting against some of the Smile Fruit users in the prison. The opponents this time are Alpaca Man, who we have met before, and Madillo Man, who has a full armadillo stuck on his back with one of the armadillo's feet weirdly dangling from his side. This is another proof of how incomplete the artificial devil fruits really are, and that make you really question more and more how Momo can actually transform into a full animal, even if it doesn't look very impressive. He's for sure the most complete Smile user we've seen so far, if he indeed is a Smile user at all. The new opponents have brought Sea Stone bullets that we learn are exclusively produced in Wano. And while the audience of Queen's entourage clearly seem to think that this must now be the end for the two prisoners, Queen seems to be well aware of the fact that his men will be beaten again. Still, he really seems to enjoy the show for some reason. Now, the fight itself is just awesome from all perspectives and had me grinning all the way through. We start off with Luffy demonstrating his future sight haki that he seems to be fairly comfortable with using now. While effortlessly dodging the close-range bullet shot at him, he calmly tells Hyogoro where his opponent would attack next and where he should move next. Since Luffy predicts the bullets even before they leave the gun, Hyogoro actually asks Luffy if he can see the future. Now, after getting this really awesome confirmation that Luffy is indeed able to use his new learned observation skills also outside of the battle with Katakuri, we now switch our focus over to armament haki. Luffy jumps towards the alpaca with his haki-infused fist just to stop right in front of his face. He then picks up Hyogoro and explains to him that in his training, as he calls it, his goal is to punch so hard that he can push his opponent without even touching them. For this, Luffy refers back to what he has seen Rayleigh and Sentomaru do previously. By the way, as a quick remark, I think it's fair to assume at this point that Sentomaru is actually from Wano as well. Maybe we will hear or even see more of him later on in this arc. Now, after explaining what he's trying to do, Hyogoro, to our surprise, says that he knows a similar technique, jumps off Luffy's back and decimates Alpaca Man without even touching him. Damn. We all thought that Hyogoro would be important in some way or the other, but I honestly wouldn't have expected him to become Luffy's new personal haki coach. Still, he says himself that he will at least try to teach Luffy this advanced form of armament haki if they make it out alive. And even better, we also get the clear connection to the armament haki use in swords, since Hyogoro tells us that he learned this technique from a swordmaster. Could this advanced form of armament haki simply mean infusing haki outside of your body? Is it connected to the Kuja clan's arrows or the creation of the Black Blades? If you want to hear a little bit more about my thoughts on this, make sure to check out my new video on haki infusion. But not until after this video, of course. So what have we learned in this chapter? We have finally seen Zoro's reaction to the reveal of Hyourse, who filled us in on the events 20 years ago. We got to see how much she suffered from losing her family and how different she actually is from her mask as Kumurasaki. We also got to know more about Kawamatsu, who took care of the princess after her parents' death, and who seems to be confirmed as either real Kappa or an Oda mink mistaken for a water demon. We also learned the full list of the Red Scabbards, with only Denjiro's identity still being a mystery so far. We got to see the followers of the Kozuki locked up in the middle of the city in a huge public cell that is just perfect for a mass breakout. And finally, we got to see Luffy continuing his trainee in the execution match with Hyogoro. We first got to see him use his new future sight haki skills, and then trying to master the advanced armament haki he so rarely used during his training. To our big surprise, Hyogoro actually is capable of this technique and hinted at becoming Luffy's new teacher. Interestingly enough, it seems to me that people in Wano seem to have a very deep understanding of armament haki, but only a rough idea about observation haki. Now, all in all, this chapter was just what I needed after the break. A reaction from Zoro to the Hiyori reveal with more follow-up information on Wano. Then we got some awesome fighting action in Udon with both advanced observation and armament haki present. I can definitely start into my weekend now happily. But now let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you liked this video, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to be notified for any future content of mine. Or dislike, don't share and unsubscribe. It's a free world, people. Thanks so much for listening, I hope to see you around next time, and until then, have a great week.